All right. How you guys doing?
Right?
Yeah? How's everyone doing out there? Good day so far? Strong response. I'm Steve. It's a pleasure today to be here with my co-authors on the European Deep Tech report. We're very excited to launch the 2025 version. It's a very long report, so I hope someone reads it. But it was a lot of fun to do together. Maybe to start, I'll hand over to Yoram for a quick introduction. We can go down the line on kind of what they're focused on and related to the Deep Tech report, and then we'll jump into a few of the highlight slides and some interesting things that popped out to us that we wanted to go into a bit of color on. So, Yoram?
Yeah, do you want us to do introductions quickly?
Yeah, super quick.
Yeah, Yoram Wijngaarde. I'm the founder and CEO of Dealroom, which is a global data platform for startup ecosystems.
I'm Nicolas, Autret partner with Walden Catalyst Ventures. We're a US firm investing across US, Europe, and Israel in deep tech, Series A, B, and C. So semiconductor, robotics, and AI is our stuff.
Lukas, as you can tell by my funny accent, from Germany, part of the Lakestar deep tech team actually, and helped to build it up from the ground. Multi-stage fund, we invest from C to Series B, C, D onwards.
And Arnaud, one of the co-founders and CEO of Hello Tomorrow, and also founding partner of Dealroom Ventures.
Yep. And like I said, I'm Steve, previously a partner working with Lukas at Lakestar, founded the deep tech practice there, and starting something new now. So if we pull up the slides, if you don't mind.
They do mind.
They do mind. OK. So European Deep Tech report. At the end of our talk, there will be a QR code for anyone who wants to be the first to download it. It would be great if you could share it and get the word out, because this is first exposure for today's work. Where we wanted to start, in this first section of the report, there's 5 or 6 sections. We talk a lot about misconceptions in deep tech. A lot of the questions that we and many of you get out there as founders and as VCs in the deep tech space. And this slide shows some of the key takeaways in terms of our data-driven research into some of these questions that we get asked in the misconceptions. So my first dig in here, Lukas, will be for you. When you looked at the data and you really went deep on it, what was the most interesting learning about deep tech startups in terms of the time and capital required to get to an exit? And why do you think the misconceptions in the market, the misunderstandings, are so different from what the data suggests to you?
Yeah, so I believe 2 of the most interesting findings actually were, on the one side is deep tech is almost like fine wine. It takes a little bit longer until it's developed, but then once it actually matures, it's actually outperforms some of the other assets. So yes, it takes a little bit longer until the first revenue milestones are hit, but once they are actually hit, it actually accelerates and outgrows some of the shallow tech companies that we've seen. And then the other thing is, I think, the second key important milestone actually for deep tech is CapEx element of deep tech is not a mistake, actually. So I would say it's actually a weapon. It can be a weapon if used right. CapEx can actually be used to build IP and moat, and you don't have to burn all of the money on giving discounts to customers to ship your groceries somewhere. Amazing for customers, but not sustainable for the companies. So I think these 2 factors are oftentimes misunderstood. And the reason for that, I think, is twofold, and a combination of 2 unfavorable things. So on the one side, valuation in venture is tied to de-risking. That means as you grow and build out your company, you de-risk slowly your company. And once you've hit the de-risking milestones, your valuation will actually increase. And the second thing is that investors are human. That means actually they are great at pattern recognition. They are great at using heuristics to assess the de-risking part, actually. And the European VC brain, in my opinion, has been wired to recognizing patterns for SaaS businesses. We have all the great heuristics. You have to grow triple, double, LTV to CAC ratios, and so on. But these metrics are not the right metrics in order for deep tech investors to assess the de-risking part of deep tech companies. And so the human nature tends to shy away from everything that is unknown, everything that is not the pattern that they know. And this is why I think a lot of misconceptions in the deep tech world actually exist.
Great insights. Yoram, turning to you. Were you surprised at how comparable the failure rates and the capital requirements were for deep tech companies compared to SaaS counterparts?
Yeah, no, I was not surprised because we've been saying this for many years, but I can understand why it's counterintuitive to a lot of people. And they might even say, yeah, okay, yeah, these guys do a deep tech report. Of course, they're saying that they just want to, shed a nice light on deep tech. But if you really think about it, it actually makes sense. I think it ties in very much to what you just said. But in the very initial stages of funding, maybe you don't go to market yet. So actually you have a little bit of a bit of protection. Let's say that's actually maybe a bad reason why the conversion, the graduation rate doesn't change that much. But then once your kind of readiness improves and you actually do go to market. Yeah, there is that moment where the company might fail, but that's normal. But then if you manage to break out of that, what Lukas just said, you actually have built a moat. You apparently have found some kind of breakthrough technology, and you don't have competitors. And at that point, your chances of success are way higher. So if you take that whole journey combined, it actually, if you really think about it, makes sense that the failure rate is not higher.
Yeah, and you don't have to take our word for it, to Yoram's point. This is the summary slide in the deck. There's 20 or 30 slides behind it with data-driven research into the space that many of you might find useful when you're putting together pitch decks and kind of convincing people that have these misconceptions otherwise. But let's move on to section 2 of the report. In this section, we talk about the opportunity within Europe for deep tech and compare and contrast it to other markets like the US. Key insights are 30% of top technical global universities are in Europe. 40% of top technical research institutes are in Europe. The talent, the educational systems, the raw capability, easily present here in Europe, and with current geopolitical environments, especially related to China, like it's over half of the highly technical talent accessible both to Europe and the US resides here in Europe, which is a huge asset. So with this data in mind, Arnaud, people spinning out companies from DeepMind, from Alkin, from Darktrace, these big successful deep tech outcomes that we've seen from Europe, how do you foresee the European deep tech flywheel accelerating in the next decade? And why is that critical component, why is that such a critical component to the success of future deep tech companies?
I'll go back to this question, but I wanted to also add maybe some misconceptions. I think they were on another page of the report. And we've also proven with our analysis that actually hardware performs better than software. So I think it's also counterintuitive because after 2 decades of B2B SaaS and e-commerce really driving VC investment, it sounds like software is really scalable. So that's where you can make big money. But actually, it's not really true because if the marginal cost of adding one new user is almost zero, there is a lot of customer acquisition cost. While deep tech with the barrier to entry through IP, it's not so much. So actually, hardware might be more scalable. And the other one was that we've seen that startups that go through accelerators actually don't perform better than startups that do, which I think is a wake-up call also for accelerators in Europe to be more adapted to deep tech. Because a lot of accelerators, they are about, doing some masterclass about entrepreneurship, growth hacking techniques. And this is not very useful in deep tech where you need very specific industry expertise and network to create value for the companies. So I'll go back to your question.
Yeah. And that was data from research that you did at Hello Tomorrow, right?
Exactly. Because what we did is that we looked at all the startups that we selected as deep tech pioneers, so the ones that are here in this audience that you can see downstairs. And we looked at what have been the financial performance since we kind of discovered them. And we looked at the performance depending on the maturity, the product type. And I'm going to share more information about this analysis and this later on in this room, the Deep Tech Academy. But this analysis is, yes, in this report. And I think it's also breaking busting some of the myths about VC as an asset class. And yes, the talents, of course, especially in early stages, that's always what VCs look at first, because that's what will drive the whole company. And startups can always pivot, but the team is the team. And it's true that if we look at the half-empty glass, there is a gap compared to the US, because yes, a lot of the experienced founders today in Europe are more in software, because it's in deep tech. It's more recent that we have so many startups, so it takes some time to fail and even more time to succeed and exit. So we don't have that many repeat founders. But if we look at the half full glass, compared to 10 years ago or even 7 years ago, we've seen the gap of quality, let's say, between European founders and US founders really closing. Like 8 years ago, you would look at the startups pitching in the stage there. It was really looking at scientists at a scientific conference. It was a bit embarrassing sometimes compared to the US companies, like pitching really well and clearly knowing what was their market, what they were doing. And today you don't really see a difference. So I think that's already it's been improving really quite a lot. And we see also many European startups that kind of manage to close the gap because they don't have an experienced founder, but they hire someone from the industry that has the industry expertise, the industry network. So yes, I think it's indeed there is still a gap, but on the positive aspect, it's much better than a few years ago, and we are starting to see this flywheel working in deep tech as well. So I think that in the next 10 years, we are going to see amazing founders going to deep tech.
Great. Moving on to the next section of the report, we talk about, we highlight a lot of the funding aspects of deep tech within Europe, and this is one of the summary slides of that section. One of the most interesting insights, and we said a similar thing last year, was that while there is a decline in deep tech investing, that's part of a broader decline in venture capital deployment. But the amount that deep tech investment has declined is less than half than what we see in the decline in SaaS investing, which is a really substantial statistic when you think about the relative performance of deep tech to SaaS investing. Also, when we did a sector analysis, if you roll up all of the different parts of deep tech into one category, it's actually the single largest sector of VC investment within Europe, which is pretty impressive as compared to fintech or health tech or enterprise SaaS. Of course, if you combine all software together, that's bigger than deep tech. But when you look at how investors tend to specialize, deep tech is the largest. Nicolas, when you think about SaaS funding and this decline, how do you think, I guess, what surprised you about it? What do you think caused it? And how do you think it will play out over the coming few years?
I think it comes down to essentially two things, right? I think one is market correction, and the other one is a shift in interest. So maybe going back to market correction, 2021, 2022, craziness on both public and private markets. The COVID era, people were working remotely, strong investments in software tools. And so if you look at valuation metrics for public companies in enterprise and enterprise software and SaaS, you had a premium. I think the SaaS index was 16 to 18x revenue multiple. And all of that, drove investments, private investments in SaaS companies. At the time, it was scale at all cost. Even if you're not profitable, it's scale, scale, scale. Comes 2022, for different reasons, market correction on the public markets. And so if you look at valuation multiples, they go down to their historical level, actually, 6x to 8x revenue multiple. That public market correction, which was almost, happened very shortly, actually took a bit of time to reach private markets. 6 months to 12 months lag, depending whether you're in the US or in Europe. And the reason is, for a period of time, 2022, you had a mismatch between investors and entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs were still running on the hypothesis that they could get very big rounds at very high valuations, and investors had already shifted their mind and were not willing to pay the price anymore. So the market was almost blocked for 6 to 12 months, except obviously for the high quality assets where all VCs were fighting for. You had a fight for quality, essentially. So that's the first reason, market correction, that really explains, the drop in VC funding. I think second reason, which is probably a bit more recent, 2023, you had your chat GPT moment. Stating a bit of the obvious here, but I think OpenAI took the world by surprise. And suddenly, when we talk about enterprise software, it was all about LLMs, generative AI, SLMs, vertical AI, etc. So the interest from investors actually shifted from enterprise SaaS to the LLMs of the world, which, by the way, is very different, right? When we talk about SaaS, we're talking about distribution modality and business model. When we talk about LLMs, we're talking about technology here. But the interest shifted to these types of companies. And so you saw an explosion. At the same time you saw a decline in SaaS funding, you also saw an explosion in Gen AI and LLM funding with some of the big rounds that we heard in the US or in Europe, the OpenAI, Anthropic, and Claude, and Mistral and others. At the end of the day, what I take away from that slide here is not so much the SaaS decline. I personally don't care about SaaS. I think our humanity, our world has massive challenges to solve, right? How to produce decarbonized energy, how to produce clean food, clean water, how to design new drugs to cure the disease, the undrugged disease, and that can only be addressed and solved with hard science, with technology breakthrough, with deep tech. And what I take away from that slide here is the resiliency, the continued interest in deep tech as an asset class. And I think that's great news for us globally, but also for us in Europe, as we see the level of investment is sustained. So I think it's pretty good news.
Yeah. Lukas, building on that and kind of focusing on the relative appetite for deep tech to regular tech, 28% of VC dollars are going into deep tech now. It's almost a third of all venture investment within Europe. What do you think is driving, and this is not the first year that that's been the case, what do you think is driving the sustained increase in deep tech capital deployment relative to investment in fintech, health tech, enterprise SaaS?
There are probably three themes, I would say. So the first one is what Nicolas actually said. At the end of the day, we need novel science and engineering if we want to solve the biggest problems that we have right now here on Earth. I mean, I love quick commerce. I love ordering my food at 11 p.m. When I'm on the couch and watching Netflix. But it won't help us solve climate change. It won't help us fight adversaries. It won't help us kind of cure some of the uncurable diseases that we have right now out there. So the first argument is really a normative one, saying like we need it actually, and I think people realize that. I think the second point is that it is a geopolitical necessity actually, and people underestimate how much deep tech is actually linked to national identity. And the good example for that is probably, I mean, as you can tell by my accent, I'm from Germany, but how important the internal combustion engine is also for the national pride actually of Germans. It's actually amazing to see, and we also see now that automotive industry is actually struggling, what that actually does to a nation. And we also see that in Taiwan with 90% of the highly advanced AI chips being produced there, how important that is also to their national security actually. And so the second argument is really kind of a geopolitical one, that deep tech will define the next geopolitical winners and losers of this century actually.
Specifically, deep tech that mints global champions. The German auto industry is so valuable because it is a globally dominant player, right? The Taiwanese semiconductor industry is a globally dominant player. So I think, to your point, building these incredible companies that are global champions is critical to what you're saying, national security.
And we should have that confidence, self-confidence actually here in Europe. I want to see that among founders actually go out there and say like, hey, I want to build a global deep tech company. I want to build a global champion actually, because sometimes we're underselling ourselves here in Europe, I think. And the last argument actually is a financial one actually. As Arnaud highlighted, if you look at the survey, actually, IRRs of deep tech portfolios with hardware elements actually outperform software IRRs actually on a large degree. And we see it also on this slide where we see that deep tech is a hedge against market momentum and in momentum investing in a way. Because at the end of the day, if you invest in critically underlying infrastructure technology, market cycles matter much less. And so from a financial perspective, I think deep tech is also, just from a return perspective, an interesting addition to asset management portfolios.
Great. Yoram, our data master. When you look at the shifts in seed rounds, Series A rounds for deep tech companies, and you think about valuations, and you think about round sizes and how they've been changing over time, what's standing out to you, and what should founders expect, right, going forward in terms of what seed and Series A rounds are going to look like, and why? What's driving that?
Yeah, okay. So before I answer that question, I wanted to respond to one thing that Lukas said, because you gave 3 reasons, and you said as a third reason, and besides, it's also financially interesting. But I think when we're talking about venture capital, making money should always be the #1 priority. Otherwise, the whole business falls apart. And that should be the driver. And indeed, the report nicely shows that actually that is not only possible in deep tech, but if you look at the biggest tech companies in Europe, most of them were deep tech companies when they started. And if we start talking too much about, it's actually, to make the world better, I think it actually can be a little bit toxic almost, because people feel like they're doing things for the greater good. But in the end, you build a company to make money for yourself and for the investors. That has to be the #1 priority.
So now, valuations and round sizes. What should seed and Series A founders expect?
So when you look at kind of the round sizes, there's 1,000 different things actually happening at the same time. But you do see a consistent increase in the average round size in Europe. So both pre-seed, seed, and Series A rounds are kind of steadily going up. There's so many things happening at the same time. I think one thing is the European ecosystem is maturing. You get better founders, like because of the second and third generation. And better investors. So actually the portion of funding that comes from inexperienced both investors and founders, that's kind of steadily reducing. So that's definitely a good thing. Then secondly, because of what you see in this chart, you see kind of a drop-off. So like the standard of investing has gone higher. So the quality of startups and founders is on average is going up versus a few years ago. So that's also a good thing. And then thirdly, I would say because of AI, there's especially some AI companies that are just so hotly contested. Everybody wants to invest, so they can definitely raise a larger seed round. And you see in the data, companies in AI on average raise about 1.5, 1.8 times larger seed rounds than the rest. And I think that is actually mainly driven just by supply and demand.
Yep, and hype. Okay, last question on this slide for you, Arnaud. We see that roughly half of late-stage deep tech capital comes from outside of Europe, which is significantly less, the amount of capital Europe is providing at the late stage is significantly less than early stage capital. I think most people know that. Why do you think there has been such a slow pickup in late stage capital availability from European investors to European deep tech companies?
Well, I think it's very simple, and it's not just for deep tech. Is that if you think, for maybe those who are not familiar with how VC works, you need to invest in several companies, like at least, let's say, 20, to reduce the risk through diversification. Could be a bit less if it's really growth stage and there is not so much risk. So to be able to write checks of more than 100 million euros, you need a fund, like a pool of money that is at least 2 billion euros. And in Europe, there are maybe 2 or 3 funds that are this size. So it's just that funds are not big enough to write big checks without create too much risk for their LPs. And in the US, I've checked when preparing this session, there are between 15 and 20 funds that are above 10 million of asset under management.
10 billion.
10 billion, sorry, 10 billion. So it's really like in the US ecosystem, it's one order of magnitude more in terms of the size of the asset under management. So it means it's also one order of magnitude more in terms of the size of the checks that they are able to write to founders. So again, it's not just in deep tech, but it means that indeed it's very hard for deep tech founders when they need to raise like 500 million to raise this kind of money in Europe. So we do see a lot of them turning to the US, turning to the Middle East or to Asia because they have just deeper pockets. I mean, it's not necessarily bad. It's certainly better this way than just drawing out of money and dying. So it's better to keep thriving even if it's foreign money. But it's true that in times of sovereignty, we talk about sovereignty. It means sometimes that the part of the control of the company is being delocalized to another region. So again, from a global perspective, it doesn't matter. From a European perspective, yes, it can matter. And what can we do about it? There have been some initiatives, like for example, in France, the TB initiatives to try to identify the funds that have the right infrastructure, the right team to manage this kind of big amount of money, to also try to drive some of the savings, pension funds money or institutional investors' money in this kind of VC asset class, because the problem in France, but in Europe also, is that we don't have the same kind of venturing mindset that is more present in the US. So the money, the savings, the personal savings, it goes to buying a flat, like to maybe going in livret A in France, like so some things that are really not risky, but that also don't bring so much return for the investors. So we don't have this culture of putting money into VC, and even big institutional investors. It's they are investing more in private equity than in VC. So I think you cannot really change a mindset top down. It's not something you can decide, but hopefully slowly. It's going to change, and maybe also what's happening at the moment, it's a wake-up call for Europe to reclaim some of its industrial technology leadership, and maybe investing in more risky assets will become a bit more sexy for individuals.
Should accelerate the change.
Yeah, I hope so, because I think there is not much we can do about it, but it's really a matter of mindset. And if this doesn't change, it will be hard for individuals to accept that their savings, their pension, their retirement is being investing in risky VC asset class.
Yeah.
So, but that's the only way it's going to change.
Yep. So with an eye on the time, and we want to save some time for questions towards the end. So I think for the last few questions, we might have to go a little quick. The fourth section of the report, which I know for some of you is the most interesting one, we do a bunch of deep dives, and we chose select areas that we thought were particularly interesting and relevant in 2024 to share some of our research and insights. Nicolas, I'm going to jump straight to you. We've seen a dramatic uptick in founders building robotics and photonics companies. Why do you think that's happening now? What is catalyzing this sudden growth spurt in those two industries? And what are you personally most excited about that's starting to come to fruition?
Yeah, so two very different topics, maybe starting with photonics. It's about energy, if you think about it. So again, stating the obvious here, we've all seen the rise of AI in our everyday lives, whether we talk about, I don't know, autonomous driving or assisted driving, search, translation, anything, right? All of that is essentially built on very large infrastructure. Data centers, GPUs, memories at scale. Every time you train, one of these large language models, you train it over tens of thousands of GPUs. And about a month ago, we had the AI Summit here in France, and we announced 100 billion investment in building that infrastructure in France, but it's the same across all countries, US, Middle East, and the rest of Europe. That comes at a cost, which is a cost of energy. It is estimated, I think, that the AI for data centers is essentially 2% of the global power demand, and that should increase twofold to 4% before the end of the decade. So now, Stephen, I'm sure you're going to ask, but why does it consume so much energy, right? It's essentially the cost of moving electrons. When you train data, when you train your models, when you run your models, you are essentially move data around between high bandwidth memory and your processing core, and back and forth. You move data all the time, and actually there is a bit of a misconception, which is the energy consumed in data centers is the processing. Actually, not. It's just moving data around, back and forth all the time. And turns out all this data movement is done over copper, so electric wires, and that does not scale. Actually, the longer the distance, the more power you have to use to push that data, to push the electrons. Photonics, so essentially photons, moving data on fiberglass is a lot more scalable, which means that if you push data on short distance, millimeters or meters, same, doesn't cost more energy. And so it's one way, to solve this huge energy bottleneck we have in data centers. The 4% figure I mentioned earlier is nothing dramatic, right? In the big scheme of things, when you look at the overall power demand, it's not so much at the end of the day. But the challenge is this power is very localized. If you look at geographic map, the power that you need to supply to very specific locations, data centers, is putting a huge constraint on the power grid, and so we need to fix that. Photonics is the answer. And so we're seeing, new startups in a variety of domains, and I think in the presentation you have a lot to unpack there. Advanced packaging, new materials like thin film lithium niobate that are used to really bring this photonics as close to the processing as possible, with the consequence that it would reduce the power consumed, and then plenty of benefits, higher bandwidth, less cooling to do because you have less overheating, etc. Europe has plenty of startups in that field, so very excited about that. Maybe switching to robotics now.
So we have to be a little quick on this one.
No, I don't want to. I'm passionate about robotics. So long story short, interest rising a lot for robotics, different waves of innovation in robotics. It's not a new category. First robot dates back to, I think, the 50s. First wave of adoption, manufacturing, particularly in the automotive in Germany, robotic arms to build cars. Second wave of adoption, warehouse and logistics, companies like Kiva, companies like Exotech in France, mid-2000s, early 2010s. Third wave of adoption, autonomous driving, and it's still ongoing, and actually it's going to take more time. New wave now of adoption in robotic, new form factors, humanoid, four-legged drones, ground robots, that are adopted in setups where you have uncontrolled environment as opposed to a factory line where it's very static and very controlled. So lots of excitement for that category, because if you look at the industries embracing robotics, they're all facing the same challenge, which is labor shortage. And robotics here can bring a sustainable, low-cost, consistent solution to the labor shortage that. Sorry, my phone is ringing. To the labor shortage that these industries are facing. The challenge. Technical challenges compounding, because it's a system level. So you have individual components, and for each component, processing, sensing, battery,
Actuation.
Exactly. All of that is compounding. So it's a real challenge to build a robot that can actually go out there, be reliable, be robust enough, and deliver value to the customers.
Yeah.
But
to your point, it's a new type of robotics, right, that has to solve these new types of challenges.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think, Europe, we have amazing talent, research centers, ETH in Zurich, Oxford, etc. We have a very robust ecosystem. I'm particularly thinking about Germany, which is very good in, mechatronics. We have funding. So now we just have to build these great companies, and we are, super excited about that.
Awesome. Last question, Lukas, goes to you. Two of the other deep dives that we did, looking at AI, looking at how we power AI. What stood out to you? What's the quick highlight you want to give on that?
I think before I give my argument, I probably have to set the scene a little bit, because otherwise maybe also Nicolas will get mad at me, because he's such a fan of robotics. But I think AI, obviously, we've seen unprecedented levels of AI and unprecedented capabilities of AI, actually. So think about AI working on designing new drugs, actually, and finding new molecules, working on new engineering designs, or AI being able to work with language and translate in real time and so on. So I think there have been amazing advancement in AI, especially around language, and we're all aware of that. But my argument would probably be the most surprising thing, or the most advanced, the most important thing actually in AI right now is the acknowledgement and our knowledge of how stupid AI still is, actually. But I mean that in a positive way, because that gives us so much room actually to grow, and we already know which kind of things, puzzle pieces that we are still missing in order to make AI really actually great. And I give you a quick example actually. So there's Moravec's paradox actually out there. So that basically says what's easy for humans is difficult for AI, but what's difficult for humans is oftentimes very, very easy for AI. So think about chess, think about playing Go, think about real-time translation, and so on. So these things are very easy for AI, but easy for AI actually, and difficult for humans to really outperform at an important level. And some of the key facts are, for example, that are still missing in AI right now is physical understanding of the world. So a 9-month-old toddler already has a physical intuition, actually. If I grab this table and I pull it off if I grab this plate and pull it off the table, it will fall down. And AI doesn't have a physical intuition, actually, now. A 17-year-old need maybe 20 hours of training, and he or she can actually drive a car. We're still not there yet with autonomous driving, actually. So we have a lot of improvements, and we know what the kind of levers are that we need to pull in order to make AI actually more important and more sample efficient, actually, and use data more efficiently. So I think that's the most important message that I want to send, that AI is still stupid, but we know what to improve, actually.
I like it. I just want to quickly highlight, there's 2 more sections of the report. We won't get into it here. One of them covers advice for founders, common questions that we get, things we feel might be helpful to the deep tech founder community. And there's a whole bunch of information in there, and encourage everyone to take a look. And then the second are recommendations. And we gave a bunch of recommendations last year. We rate how we did. We kind of note progress that we've seen. We add a few more. And we encourage everyone to take a peek at that. So with that, cool. You're welcome to download the report. It's at the QR code here. If you share it online with some relevant hashtag, like European Deep Tech Report, then it'll get to more people, which is cool for all of us. You can be the cool kids that started the party. Very happy for you to share it. We'd love for you to tag us or something that kind of brings the community together and catalyzes a conversation. Yeah, I think with that, we're ready to go to questions. I have a slide here. I don't know the process for activating that. I think that happens backstage. But maybe I will check to see if there's already questions coming in. So far, there is not. How do people know where to go for questions?
I think there need to be a QR code as well for people to be able to access it and to ask questions.
Then they might need to do that backstage.
Maybe we can do it old school and people just raise their hand.
With the mic going on.
Oh, there's a hand.
That's the founder mentality, walking into the audience to give her the mic.
Hello, I'm Tanya from the United States. A great presentation. Question on cyber mechanics. Do you guys intentionally don't break it up, or is it robotics, AI? Because what my company is working on is joining it all together.
The question was about cyber mechanics?
Yes, as a category in your report.
I think that's part of the novel robotics section that we have. We might not use that word specifically.
Novel robotics, okay.
Yeah, but we
like
have an
that.
entire, again, this was I think it was 180 something slides in this deck. So there's a whole section on novel robotics, and we break things down. If you feel we've missed a very specific section that you think is important, reach out to us, let us know, and we can integrate it in the future. But I would look there first. Sorry, I just took that one because it's quick. Anyone else? I can't really see.
Hello, Nicolas from TDK Ventures. I want to know what each of you are most excited to invest in 2025. One each.
Lukas, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, so for me, I think if you look at current AI models, they need roughly 10 to the power of 7, humans need roughly 10 to the power of 7 words until they're really able to learn language. Current AI models need 10 to the power of 12 or 10 to the power of 13 kind of data tokens, actually. So I think we need new sample-efficient algorithms and AI models, actually. So for me, it's really working with labs, comes actually after transformer models and large language models, and what are new learning algorithms actually to make AI more efficient.
Good to see you, Nicolas. Robotic, very short answer. And everything robotic related.
And I would say the hardware to enable the energy transition. For example, power electronics. So we did 2 investments actually in power semiconductors, because to enable the electrification of mobility of the industry, we need to be able to change the way we change the power from continuous to alternative, different. So what works in very low voltage in our cell phones, for example, doesn't work in electric vehicles or at even higher power in the industry. So there is a lot of opportunity to bring more efficiency, reduce the cost, and there are a lot of solutions out there. And today, it's not so much the focus of most VCs, so that's why I'm pretty bullish on this specific topic as well.
I would say something healthcare application based on AI, maybe just something that's just maybe coming out of deep tech, almost going into regular tech.
My answer is, I agree with actually everything you guys said. I think the thing I would add to it is, obviously we're seeing a geopolitical shift, right? There's a lot of moving parts, some we agree with, some we don't. But I think what is undeniable is that countries are realizing that they need to make sure that they're going to have the technologies they need if unexpected movements happen within that geopolitical landscape. And so I think there's a lot of opportunities. I know you asked for specifics. There's a lot of opportunities within infrastructural companies within each country that need to make sure that their technology stack is modernized and independent. And so there's going to be a lot of new companies that come out, and whether it's the electrical grid, whether it's the manufacturing, robotics for manufacturing, whether it's transportation, whether it's data center operation. There's technologies that need to be deployed that are going to have to be controlled locally, but the supply chains for those are going to be kind of co-localized. And that's not really a solved problem yet. There's still a lot of interdependency that hasn't been federated, so to speak. So, yeah. Sovereignty enabling infrastructural companies. All right, one more question.
What type of evolution do you see or wishable in intellectual property rights economic model in order to give incentive to any input provider, contributor, to have a fair tribute for what they brought in without being stolen by more powerful company who has more legal capability to win for only themselves all the efforts that have been provided previously.
So from what I understand, what evolution of the IP model to enable the initial contributors to be rewarded for the work that they did prior to the creation of the company? I mean, my personal answer was that, I mean, I don't think that the people creating the IP are being stolen. I think that people in academia, usually they are in the cap table of the companies. They have some incentives for so they are incentivized on the success of the companies. And I think I would say it's almost the other way around. Sometimes the researchers, they need to understand that this is only the starting point, the IP that has been developed in research labs. I mean, I think most of the hard work is actually after this stage when you need to build a company, you need to create the team, you need to sell it, you need to, I mean, it's very difficult, it's very painful, and I don't think that it's unfair the way it is done today. I think it would be more on the other way around. Sometimes the universities that are a bit too big in the cap table.
Often in Europe.
Not always, but.
Okay, thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining the panel. We hope you enjoy the European Deep Tech Report. Please reach out to us with comments, with questions. We love the feedback. We use it to inform next year's version. It's been a pleasure being on stage with you, and see you around the conference.